story I want to talk about is one that it took me 2.5 years, almost 3 years to not cry by just telling this story. It's my favorite story of Woodland Cemetery of all the people, all 115,000 of them. Jordan Anderson is my favorite person thus far. So his story. Jordan Anderson was born in December of 1825, someplace in Tennessee, and he became a slave of General Paulding Anderson of Big Spring, Wilson County, Tennessee, sometime around 1833 when he was 7 or 8 years old. General Anderson was a somewhat famous man in Wilson County, having once served in the state legislature. One of General Anderson's sons was Patrick Henry Anderson Sr., who was born in 1823, making him about 10 years old when Jordan arrived at the family. On August 7th of 1844, Patrick Anderson married Mary A. McGregor, and she brought with her at least 2 servants, Amanda McGregor, born in 1829, and her mother, Priscilla McGregor, born in 1801. Patrick took several of his father's slaves to a new home, including Jordan. In 1848, Jordan married Amanda McGregor. He was 23 and she was 19. Over the years, Amanda had 11 children. The ones born in Tennessee were Matilda, Catherine, Mildred, known as Millie, Jane, and Felix Grundy. Jordan and his family left Colonel Anderson sometime in 1864, with Jordan receiving his free papers from the Provost Marshal General in Nashville, Tennessee, and getting a job at the hospital in Nashville. And by the summer of 1865, Jordan and his family had moved to Dayton. Sometime during the summer of 1865, Colonel Patrick Anderson wrote a letter to Jordan asking him to return to Big Springs and live there again. While this letter is lost to time, Jordan's reply is not. So on August 7th of 1865, Jordan, who could not read or write at the time, dictated a letter to his old master, and that's what I'm going to read for you. To my old master, Colonel P.H. Anderson, Big Spring, Tennessee. Sir, I got your letter and was glad to find that you had not forgotten Jordan and that you wanted me to come back and live with you again, promising to do better for me than anybody else can. I have often felt uneasy about you. I thought the Yankees would have hung you long before this for harboring Reds they found at your house. I suppose they never heard about your going to Colonel Martin's to kill the Union soldier that was left by his company in their stable. Although you shot at me twice before I left you, I did not want to hear of your being hurt, and am glad you are still living. It would do me good to go back to the dear old home again and see Miss Mary and Miss Martha and Alan, Esther, Green, and Lee. Give my love to them all and tell them I hope we will meet in the better world, if not in this. I would have gone back to see you all when I was working in the Nashville hospital, but one of the neighbors told me that Henry intended to shoot me if he ever got the chance. I want to know particularly what the good chance is you propose to give me. I am doing tolerably well here. I get $25 a month with victuals and clothing. I have a comfortable home for Mandy, and the folks call her Mrs. Anderson. And the children, Millie, Jane, and Grundy, they go to school and are learning well. The teacher says Grundy has a head for a preacher. They go to Sunday school, and Mandy and me attend church regularly. We are kindly treated. Sometimes we overhear others saying, them colored people were slaves down in Tennessee. The children feel hurt when they hear such remarks, but I tell them it was no disgrace in Tennessee to belong to Colonel Anderson. Many darkies would have been proud, as I used to be, to call you master. Now, if you will write and say what wages you will give me, I will better be able to decide whether it would be to my advantage to move back again. As to my freedom, which you say I can have, there is nothing to be gained on that score, as I got my free papers in 1864. Mandy says she would be afraid to go back without some proof that you were disposed to treat us justly and kindly. And we have concluded to test your sincerity by asking you to send us our wages for the time we served you. This will make us forget and forgive old scores and rely on your justice and friendship in the future. I served you faithfully for 32 years and Mandy 20 years at $25 a month for me and $2 a week from Mandy. Our earnings would amount to $11,680. Add to this the interest for our time our wages have been kept back, and deduct what you paid for our clothing, the 3 doctor's visits for me, and pulling a tooth for Mandy, and the balance will show what we are in justice entitled to. Please send the money by Adams Express and care of V. Winters Esquire, Dayton, Ohio. If you fail to pay us for our faithful labors in the past, we can have little faith in your promises in the future. We trust the good Maker has opened your eyes to the wrongs which you and your fathers have done to me and my fathers, in making us toil for you for generations without recompense. Here I draw my wages every Saturday night, but in Tennessee there was never any payday for the Negroes any more than for the horses and cows. Surely there will be a day of reckoning for those who defraud the laborer of his hire. In answering this letter, please state if there would be any safety for my Millie and Jane, who are now grown up and both good-looking girls. You know how it was with poor Matilda and Catherine. I would rather stay here and starve and die if it come to that, than have my girls brought to shame by violence and wickedness of their young masters. You will also please state if there have been any schools open for the colored children in the neighborhood. The great desire of my life now is to give my children an education and have them form virtuous habits. Say howdy to George Carter and thank him for taking the pistol from you when you were shooting at me. From your old servant, Jordan Anderson. So, a letter, of course, the letter was a sensation at the time, and it was first reproduced in the Cincinnati commercial newspaper and then reprinted in August of 1865 in an issue of the New York Tribune newspaper. The letter was then reprinted in the Freedman's Book by Lydia Maria Child and was published in 1865. The author was an abolitionist writing several books on the subject, including an appeal in favor of the class of Americans called Africans. Today, however, she is best known for the poem Over the River and Through the Woods. Some believe that the letter from Jordan to Colonel Anderson had been fabricated, but names mentioned in connection to Colonel Anderson in the letter are real people. The Miss Mary and the Miss Martha are Colonel Anderson's wife, Mary, and their daughter, Martha. The man by the name of Henry in the letter, who seemed to have plans to shoot Jordan if he ever got the chance, was more than likely Colonel Patrick Henry Anderson's son, Patrick Henry Jr., whom everyone called Henry, and who would have been about 18 when Jordan left in 1864. George Carter, who took the pistol away from the colonel as he shot at Jordan, was a carpenter who lived in Wilson County. The 2 daughters mentioned in the letter, poor Matilda and Catherine, did not make the trip with their parents. Perhaps the abuse that it seemed the 2 girls suffered was fatal, or perhaps they were sold as slaves to other families and Jordan and Amanda did not have a way to contact them. They remain a mystery. V. Winters in the letter is Valentine Winters, a banker in Dayton and founder of Winters Bank. Jordan must have felt a deep respect for Valentine, for in 1870 his son was named after Mr. Winters. Jordan held a number of jobs and moved to a few addresses during his 42 years living in Dayton. He was a servant, a janitor, a horse minder, and a coachman. A unique opportunity came to Dayton in 1867 when the city was chosen to host the central branch of the National Asylum for Disabled Volunteer Soldiers, now known as the VA Center. Jordan was hired to drive in the stakes which laid out the site of the soldiers' home. Amanda's mother, Priscilla McGregor, died in 1879 at the age of 78, and she is buried at Woodland. And in 1894, Jordan became a sexton, a position he held until his death. The Anderson family became a fixture at the Wesleyan Methodist Church, the same church that Reverend DeSoto E. Bass would preach at. Charlotte, his daughter, would become the president of the church choir. Valentine would play violin with the organist and later became a physician. According to the census of 1900, Jordan and Amanda outlived at least 5 of their 11 children. Jordan died from exhaustion on April 15th of 1907 and is buried in Woodland Cemetery in section 109. Amanda died April 12th, 1913 and is buried next to Jordan. So what happened to Colonel Patrick Henry Anderson? He died just 2 years after the letter was written in September of 1867 at the age of 43. And near the end of this letter, Jordan states, "The great desire of my life now is to give my children an education." His dream came true. All of his children grew up to be able to read and write. As for the rest of Jordan and Amanda's children and their descendants, Felix Grundy died July 1st of 1916 and is buried at Woodland. He was employed as a buffalo soldier at the time of his death. Dr. Valentine Winters Anderson died in May 1920 and is buried at Woodland. Andrew died in 1931 and is buried at Woodland. Charlotte would be a great contributor to the Wesleyan Methodist Church, helping finance the printing of the book, A History of the Wesleyan Methodist Church of America, the story of 100 years, 1842 to 1942. As well as she wrote the foreword, and Charlotte died in 1944 and is buried at Woodland. Eva Anderson Johnson died 1937 and is buried at Woodland near her parents. So one day I was in the cemetery on the golf cart, pulling around. No, I was working. Driving around the cemetery, looking to, always doing, research and taking photos of grave sites. And I passed this group of people and they just looked lost. And they're waving me down and I stop and I'm like, "You look lost. What can I do you for?" And they're like, "We're looking for our great grandfather." And I said, "Okay, what's his name?" And they said, "Jordan Anderson." And I about fell over. I said, "He's on the other side of the cemetery." And they're like, "You know where he's at?" And I said, "Get in your cars and follow me." So there were, I don't know how many people here, and in 3 different cars, and they followed me there. And here, this entire hillside here is all of the descendants of Jordan Anderson and Amanda. 5 generations are in this photograph. And I asked them if I could take their photograph, and I said, "Would you mind just kind of, standing behind your ancestors' graves?" And they did. And so this is the photograph that I was able to take. And I asked them, "Do I have permission to use it? Because I tell his story all the time." And they're like, "Yes, tell his story any chance you get." So absolutely, I love this. Became pretty good friends with Judith Norvell, who's in here with her mother, and then her children, and then her grandchildren. So it's just fabulous story, and the family is still here in Dayton with lots of descendants. And like I said, it did take me a while to not cry getting through that letter, but I have much respect for this family and for Jordan Anderson. So. All right, Dr. William A. Bud Burns. So this excerpt was taken from Doctor to a Poet by Leo DeLuca, and it was published in the Dayton Magazine back in 2016, 2017. So William Burns was Dayton's first licensed African-American doctor. He attended Central High School on Wilkinson and 4th Streets in Dayton. A year younger than Paul Lawrence Dunbar, they were the only 2 African-American students in the school, and of course they became close friends. William Burns was, in a truer, greater sense than Paul, the friend and leader of his race in Dayton, wrote author Charlotte Reeve Conover in her 1907 book. Of some Dayton saints and prophets, Dunbar represented the unattainable things, but Burns the attainable. Losing his parents early in life, Burns was brought up by Captain Charles B. Stivers, a Civil War veteran, Central High School principal, and the namesake of Stivers School for the Arts. And it was Stivers that first encouraged Burns to pursue a career in medicine. In 1893, Burns studied under Dr. J.C. Reeve, father of Charlotte Reeve Conover, before paying his way through the Western Reserve University in Cleveland. Returning to Dayton, he opened his West 5th Street office, caring for patients of all backgrounds, including his childhood friend, Paul Lawrence Dunbar. Sadly, in May 1899, after collapsing from pneumonia while giving a reading in New York City, Dunbar began requiring more intensive treatment. Now internationally famous, the poet developed tuberculosis. He became dependent on alcohol, which was prescribed to alleviate his pain, and sought fresh air on distant health retreats before settling back home in Dayton in 1903. Burns joined Dunbar on one of his health retreats to the Catskill Mountains, and he stood by the poet's side as he struggled to stay alive. But tragically, it was Burns, not Dunbar, who died first. After a brief 2-week battle with typhoid fever, Burns died on November 19, 1905, at the age of 32. Burns' death not only shocked the medical community, but the city of Dayton as a whole, and no one took the news harder than Dunbar. Paul never seemed to recover from Bud's death, wrote author Ann Honius in her book, What Dreams We Have. A friend noted that after the funeral, Dunbar more often seemed discouraged in his fight against tuberculosis. And William Bud Burns is resting peacefully in section 33 at Woodland Cemetery. So this story seemed to have stories for almost all of these folks. I literally fell over Reverend DeSoto Bass. Wasn't looking for his gravesite. It was fall. The whole area was covered in leaves. And as you can see, Reverend Bass has a very brown gray or brown granite headstone. It was covered in leaves. I literally fell over it. Got up and I thought, now who tripped me? Turned around and uncovered the headstone. Had no idea that Reverend Bass was buried at Woodland Cemetery. So, thank you. I hear you. I see you. I saw the ground first. And I am now happy to tell his story. So Reverend DeSoto Bass was the warm-hearted clergyman and teacher known as community pastor because of his devotion to anyone who needed him, especially children. After attending Wilberforce University and the United Theological Seminary in Dayton, he became pastor of the First Wesleyan Methodist Church at the age of 28. A well-known figure in the city, Reverend Bass often took walks with crowds of children just for the fun of being with them. He frequently visited members of his congregation and provided for them if they were in need. At times, even borrowing coal from the church to give to his parishioners. A contemporary claimed that in his 33 years as pastor, Reverend Bass made more pastoral calls than any man you'd meet in a year's traveling. On Sunday afternoons for 27 years, he led singing parties, bringing groups to sing spirituals on the stair landings of the hospitals, the workhouse, and the jail. In honor of his devotion to his church, race, and people, the first public housing development in Dayton was named DeSoto Bass Courts. He died in October of 1928, located in section 126 with a brown headstone. Please do not fall over him. Geraldine Blendon was the founder and artistic director of the esteemed Dayton Contemporary Dance Company, the world's largest repository of reconstructed dance works by African-American choreographers. Miss Blendon also founded Geraldine's School of Dance. The school has given many Miami Valley youth the opportunity to learn about modern dance and pursue a dancing career. In 1997, she was named one of 5 dance women living legends for keeping dance alive. She died in November of 1999 and is located and is interred in the Woodland Mausoleum.
Angie?
Yes.
I was giving a presentation a few years ago, can't remember where now. And I was talking about women of Woodland. And there was an African-American woman that was setting up to follow me in my presentation. And she raised her hand and she says, I was a student of Geraldine Grundle. And so, you know, that immediate connection
Yeah,
with somebody that actually
yeah.
was kind of neat.
Yeah, and I remember even when I was in elementary school and we would take field trips down to the Victoria Theater, we always went to DC dance performances in the afternoon for the kids at school, which I hope they're still doing that today, because I remember that. And then, you know, in my adult life, coming back and here this person is again and some those memories. So it's so important to know about these things. And that's great. That's great. You never know who's in your audience and what stories they're gonna tell. And, you know, just what it means to them. So that's awesome. I also like this story about James Davis. So this was excerpted from James Davis by Henry Robert Burke. And it was taken from an 1890 newspaper article written by Joseph J. Wheeler for the Cleveland Plain Dealer. According to available records, James Davis was the first American child born in the United States Northwest Territory on March 6, 1787. This, of course, excludes Native Americans who at that time were considered members of tribal nations, including the Delaware, the Mingo, the Shawnee, Wyandot, and others. He was born at Fort Harmar, now part of Marietta, Ohio. James left Marietta around 1808 to become a frontier settler in western Ohio. He was one of the leading hunters in Ohio and had the credit of killing the largest bear of the day. On November 6th of 1811, he shaved General William H. Harrison while the general sat upon a log. The next day, the Great Battle of Tippecanoe was fought, and the Indians of the Great Shawnee Chief Tecumseh killed upwards of 60 men of Harrison's army, and more than 100 were wounded. Around 1815, he began his career on the Underground Railroad by helping a few fugitive slaves from Kentucky find their way across Ohio to Canada. And as time progressed, James Davis became more involved as the Underground Railroad in Ohio expanded. Through the Wesleyan Methodist Church, he collected food, clothing, and money to help fugitive slaves reach Canada. He was also dedicated to protecting free African Americans in Ohio from being kidnapped back into slavery. James was founder and first president of the American Sons of Protection, organized in February of 1849. It was the oldest benevolent society in Dayton for African Americans. The society aided fugitive slaves from the south of the Ohio River on the Underground Railroad up to Canada. James Davis died in 1862 at the age of 74. And as you can see here, he is in a section of the cemetery called Sons of Protection. So at the cemetery, there are blocks of lots that organizations could purchase, such as Sons of the American or Sons of Protection, the Catholic Church, the United Brethren Church, First Baptist Church, most of the Masons, the Independent Order of Oddfellows, all have sections that they had purchased at one time, including this. Of course, these are for African Americans, and that was part of the program of the Sons of Protection. They provided burials for people, for the African Americans who could not afford it, to be buried in a proper cemetery location. Unfortunately, most of those people do not have headstones, and only a few are identified in the cemetery lot books. Because believe me, I've looked at all of them. So this whole section, people often say, well, is there a black section at the cemetery? No, there is not a black section at the cemetery, but this is one of the oldest lots at the cemetery with burials for African Americans.
Is there some sort of a monument or something that celebrates all the people there, that even the unknown?
No, but you know, it's still a back burner and it keeps weighing on my mind, and I think I need to do it sooner rather than later. I would have to go back to the cemetery and ask my old boss if it would be possible. But I would like to get an Ohio historical marker placed at the head of that section. It wouldn't be outrageous to have that in that area. But I would have to get permission to see if the cemetery would allow it. Because I think that it would be the most advantageous place to put it, because people would then know that section was there, because it was a benevolent society. They may not know about it. Yes, Wayne.
If you need to talk to Sean about it, I'll be your backup.
Okay, I think we should get together, and I think we should actually write the Ohio Historical Marker application. So why don't you and I get together, we'll do that, and then we'll go hit Sean up and say,
Okay.
do the right thing.
Yeah, it's like we got two powerhouses here.
That's right, that's right, all right. Good to have friends. Okay. Charity Davis, Caesar Brody. Family oral and written history state that around 1803, 1804, formerly enslaved John Isaac Davis left Louisville, Kentucky, and brought his family, including his infant daughter, to the Miami Valley. Little is known of Charity Davis's mother, except that she was a Cherokee woman who gave birth to Charity in 1802. Charity was freeborn because of her mother's indigenous nativity. But to further ensure the child's freedom, John Davis journeyed across the Ohio River to the first free state, settling on the banks of the Miami in the village of Dayton. In her youthful 20s, under the threat of criminal prosecution, Charity worked with Sojourner Truth on the Underground Railroad to guarantee safe passage of the fugitive slaves of Canada. Charity became a conductor in Dayton's Underground Railroad. Known as the colored nurse or Negro nurse, Charity trained and worked with Dr. Hibbert Jewett and abolitionist Major Luther B. Bruin. Auntie Brody, as she was known by her beloved Dayton community, was a defining pioneer, a child bride and wife to 2 husbands, mother to 13 children, a freedom fighter, washerwoman, nurse, and early suffragist. C.C. Brody is listed among the attendees at the 1851 Women's Right Convention in Akron, Ohio, where Sojourner Truth delivered the famed "Ain't I a Woman" speech. As a survivor of several Dayton pro-slavery mob attacks that understandably forced many Black citizens to leave the area, Charity's commitment to stay in the city, to reclaim and rebuild, became the tie that bound a mob-torn town. Charity was a charter member and trustee of the United Daughters of Zion, who founded the Mother Church, First Wesleyan. Dayton's first Black church was born out of the smoke and ashes of the 1841 pro-slavery mob attacks on the city's Black community called Africatown. The United Daughters of Zion purchased the land, built 2 churches in 1842 and 1854, then gifted the deed to First Wesleyan. The Mother Church gave birth to the city's first school for Black children and was a place where James Davis founded the abolitionist organization, the American Sons of Protection. The church became the epicenter of interracial worship and reform over 180 years later, continues to serve. On October 11th of 2023, Mrs. Brody was inducted into the Dayton Region's Walk of Fame, and you can find her placard on West 3rd Street. George C. Cooper was a member of the Golden 13, the first 13 African-American officers commissioned by the U.S. Navy. Throughout his career, he faced considerable prejudice because of his race, yet maintained an unshakable commitment to treating everyone the way he wanted to be treated himself. Paul Stilwell's book called The Golden 13 chronicles some of the episodes of racism that these pioneering Black officers faced, such as sailors crossing the street rather than offering the appropriate salute to an officer. During his time in the Navy, and later working for the city of Dayton as the first Black department director, he served as a valued mentor for other African Americans. Mr. Cooper believed in the responsibility to help others. He was able to use his interaction with others as an opportunity to lead them to judge him not by the color of his skin, but as a human being. George Cooper died in 2002, and he is interred in the Woodland Mausoleum. We should all be familiar with Paul Laurence Dunbar. He was the first internationally renowned African-American poet and writer. And although both of Mr. Dunbar's parents were illiterate, his mother strongly encouraged him to get an education. He became the president of the Literary Society at Dayton Central High School and the editor of the school newspaper. After graduation, he collaborated with his schoolmate Orville Wright on the Dayton Tatler, a Black neighborhood newspaper printed by the Wright brothers on their West 3rd Street presses. Over his tragically short lifetime, Paul Laurence Dunbar produced a body of work which included novels, plays, short stories, newspaper articles, essays, and over 600 poems. His work contributed to a growing social consciousness and cultural identity for African Americans of the period. He is associated with the early civil rights leaders W.E.B. Du Bois, Frederick Douglass, and Booker T. Washington. Paul Laurence died on February 9, 1906, and is located in section 101, just steps away from his friends, the Wright brothers. Lieutenant Colonel Charity Adams Early was the first Black officer in the Women's Army Auxiliary Corps as a commanding officer of the only organization of Black women to serve overseas during World War II. Her book, One Woman's Army, A Black Officer Remembers the WAC, recounts her experiences as a pioneer coping with the difficulties of being an African-American woman in the Army while carrying out an enormous assignment of ensuring that the U.S. mail was delivered to every American sitting in the European theater throughout the war. Charity Adams died January 13th of 2002. The conference room in Building 12 at Sinclair Community College is named in her honor, as she was a sitting board member of Sinclair Community College, Dayton Power and Light, and she also helped found the Parity Incorporated organization. And if you haven't seen the movie 6888, please see it. It is absolutely fabulous. I've watched it 3 times and I could probably watch it another 30, so very moving and powerful. And here is Charity Adams with a group of her women. James H. McGee served 11 years, 1970 to 1981, as the first Black mayor in Dayton and was one of the first large city Black mayors in America. He earned his undergraduate degree from Wilberforce University in 1937 and graduated law school at the Ohio State University in 1948. McGee began practicing law in Dayton and soon became involved in city politics. He served as an assistant to Congressman Rodney Ludd during the War on Poverty in 1966, and then sat on the Dayton City Commission beginning in 1967. He was appointed mayor in 1970, filling Dave Hall's term, and then was elected in his own right in 1973, and then again in 1977. His early law work was for the NAACP, and he was involved in several landmark civil rights cases in the Dayton area. Western Avenue in West Dayton is now known as the James H. McGee Boulevard. On the 37th anniversary of McGee's election as mayor of Dayton, his daughter, Frances McGee, took her seat on the bench as new Common Pleas Court judge. She was the only second Black judge at that time to serve in the court's general division. James Hal McGee was born in Berryburg, West Virginia, November of 1918, and he died in 2006 at the age of 87. So I was giving this program many years ago at the Vandalia Library. And when we got to this and I had finished the talking about Mr. McGee, a hand went up and I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she says, "That's my father." And so and then I think my face turned totally white. And I said, how did I do? And she said, you got it right. I was like, okay, I got the blessing. So one of the nice things about that was that I was part of the Woodland Cemetery getting their Ohio historical marker back in 2017. And I wrote the copy on the front, and then I also put all of the 50 names on the back. Those are the 50 most important people, I think, that are in the cemetery. And I put Francis's father on there, and I had her as a guest speaker. And I also had Judith Norvell, one of the descendants of Jordan Anderson. She was also one of the speakers, as well as Stephen Wright, grandnephew of the Wright brothers. So again, you never know who's sitting in front of you. C.J. McLin was born in Illinois, the son of hardworking African-American parents trying to survive during the Depression. He took a job as a paperboy as a way to put food on the family table. And while going to Dunbar High School, he helped in the family funeral home business. The father had taught him how important funerals were to the families of the deceased. These ceremonies helped them cope with the death of their loved one. He suffered racial discrimination early in life, being denied food service at the lunch counter at McCrory's dime store at 4th and Main Streets in downtown Dayton. Soon after, he received notice to serve in the Army, and during that time in service, he noticed and experienced discrimination against Black soldiers. When he was dismissed from the military, he returned to the family funeral business in 1949. In 1966, he was elected to the Ohio House of Representatives and served for 22 years. During his time in the legislature, he worked to increase the political power in the Black community of Dayton through economic development. He was responsible for extending US Route 35 West, locating the correctional prison in West Dayton, supporting programs in its universities, housing its elderly, and saving its history by supporting the Dunbar House and the Afro-American Museum. He died in December of 1988 and is located in section 80 of the cemetery, just on the outskirts of the Sons of Protection lot that we saw in that slide earlier. James A. Parsons Jr. was an engineer, an inventor, and an educator. He graduated from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute with a degree in electrical engineering. As a chemist at the Duriron Company, he worked on the development of aluminum, bronze, and high silicone castings. You can thank him for your stainless steel sink. He later became director of the research laboratory and was awarded numerous patents for processes used in making stainless steel. Well, the patents were not in his name. They were in the name of Duriron, so he never truly benefited from those inventions. After more than 30 years at Duriron, Mr. Parsons left to become a professor for the engineering school at Tennessee State University, where he organized the first curriculum in metallurgy at any predominantly Black institution in the country. He later taught at the Ohio State University and at Garfield Skills Center in Dayton. He always emphasized mastering the basics, including clear communication, and encouraged his students to strive for excellence. Mr. Parsons' record of pioneering work in the field of engineering and education and the training of Black engineers had a positive impact on the city and also the industry. Mr. Parsons died in 1989, and he too is interred in the Woodland Mausoleum. Sergeant Lucius Rice. This was a public Dayton Police Department publication that offered biographical sketches of their officers in 1910, and this is what it reads. Lucius J. Rice, one of two colored members of the Dayton Police Force, was born at Orangeburg, North Carolina, May 27th of 1876. He received a good education there and came to Dayton when he grew up. On June 1st, 1909, he was appointed patrolman. Mr. Rice has been second sergeant of Company C, Ohio National Guard, for 2 years and distinguished himself at Lake Erie in 1908 by winning a government medal for marksmanship. He belongs to the colored KFP, which would be the Knights of Pythias and Elk Lodges. Before his appointment, Mr. Rice and his wife Dora conducted a restaurant. He is a worthy and capable officer. Sergeant Lucius Rice was the first Black man on the Dayton Police Force to hold a supervisory rank. He was promoted to the rank of sergeant on November 16th of 1916, and in a dreadful end to his long and distinguished police career, Sergeant Rice was killed in action. In 1926, Lucius Rice demonstrated his courage in a confrontation with a man wanted by police. In an attempt to arrest the man, a gun battle ensued, and although seriously injured by a gunshot wound to the abdomen, as he fell to the ground, Sergeant Rice was able to shoot and kill his attacker. Sergeant Rice survived that encounter and became detective sergeant. In 1939, Rice, along with Sergeant Wheeler and several detectives, were searching for a murder suspect when they entered a home on College Street. Sergeant Rice took the lead in the search. Suddenly, the suspect emerged from the closet firing his revolver. In the gun battle, Sergeant Rice was shot several times and struck in the abdomen for a second time in his career. The suspect was apprehended, but Sergeant Rice died from his wounds 5 days later in 1939. His career had spanned 30 years, and his murderer was tried, convicted, and executed. And Sergeant Rice is located with other family members in section 95 at the cemetery. Bob Ross. Robert Paul Ross Sr. was born November 1934 in Richmond, Indiana. At the age of 18, he became a member of the United States Army. And after moving to Dayton, Bob began working at Desi and Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. In 1962, Bob entered the automobile industry as a salesman for Shannon Buick in Dayton. And he began pursuing his dream when he was chosen to participate in the General Motors Minority Dealer Academy. And he was the first graduate of the GM Dealer Development Program to be approved as a dealer. He purchased Vivian Buick Opel and International Harvester trucks in Richmond in 1974. He became the first African-American automobile dealer in the state of Indiana, Ohio, Kentucky, and West Virginia. After successfully operating in the Richmond, Indiana area, operating Richmond, Indiana dealerships for 5 years, he purchased Davis Buick and Mercedes-Benz in Centerville, Ohio. Bob became the first African-American Mercedes-Benz dealer in the world, and then in 1982, he purchased the GMC truck franchise. Bob Ross Buick, Mercedes-Benz, GMC trucks have consistently been recognized by Black Enterprise magazine as one of the top 100 African-American automobile dealers in the nation since 1976. Bob was the first African-American dealer to serve as a member of the Mercedes-Benz Dealer Council. His civic contributions included serving on Wright State University's President's Advisory Council. He was a chairperson of the Boy Scouts of America fundraisers and a lifetime member of the NAACP. He died in 1997 and is interred at Woodland Cemetery. His wife, Norma Ross, graduated from Richmond Senior High School and received her undergraduate degree from Earlham College, also in Richmond. She worked as both a classroom teacher and a curriculum consultant in the Dayton public school system and was noted for being part of the team that established the first all-day kindergarten program in Dayton. In the 1980s, Norma started the Saturday Academy at Central State University. The Saturday Academy was a test preparation course that assisted students in preparing for the SAT. She was a foundation board member for Central State University and served as a member of the Wright Dunbar Board of Trustees. Mrs. Ross received numerous awards and recognitions for her business savvy and community involvement. And in 1997, upon the untimely death of her husband, Norma assumed command of the Bob Ross dealerships. She was honored as one of Dayton's 10 top women from the Dayton Daily News and was chosen as one of 3 Presbyterian women who received the Women of Faith Award in the United States. She also received the Humanitarian Award from the National Conference of Community and Justice And additionally, she received Earlham College Outstanding Alumni Award. During Norma's reign at Bob Ross Organization, it consisted of 3 franchises: Buick, GMC, and Mercedes-Benz. She was the only African-American female owner of a Mercedes-Benz franchise in the world, and the only African-American owner of a Buick and GMC franchise in Ohio. She also distinguished herself by exemplary service and commitment to the Dayton community. Her ceaseless love of people and generosity resulted in raising the standard of living of those less fortunate, and her efforts and character reflect great credit upon her life, her family, and her business. And she died in 2010 and is located in Woodland Cemetery Mausoleum. Yes, Wayne?
I met Janelle Ross Friday at Coco's.
Mhm.
I mean, I've met her before, but I saw her. And I asked her, I says, well, why aren't Norma and Bob located next to each other in the mausoleum?
I know the answer.
And she really didn't know why, but then she told me, she says, but they're looking at each other.
This is true. And it's just gossip, the reason why they are, and I won't repeat it here. So, but they're across the aisle from each other and looking at each other.
Yeah.
So, and I had the pleasure of, when I worked at the YWCA and I was doing the Women of Influence conference, I was the manager of that conference, and we were giving Norma the Lifetime Achievement Award, and she is fabulous. She was always put together, very well spoken, but boy, she could throw zingers of jokes out, and she was just hilarious. We all sat around in her backyard, with all these ladies with, with their feet dangling in the pool, drinking mimosas outside. And one evening it was, she was fun. She was a lot of fun. She loved her basketball, and of course we know that Janelle loves her basketball. So, the apple didn't fall far from the tree on that one. I'll give maybe one more story, because then I'll ask if there's any questions. William G. Sloan was a southpaw pitcher, and he was a hometown hero. He is credited with saving 317 people during 68 hours of continuous work during the Great Flood of 1913. A majority of the rescue work was done with a steel-bottomed boat, which Sloan acquired from a famously selfish factory owner who was refusing anyone to use it. He rode around the west side of the city, saving the stranded and those suffering in the confusion and difficulty of the disaster. Unfortunately, there were, nobody was going to the west side to save anybody over there. And so they had to do it themselves. And he and another fellow, rode around the city and saved people. He died, in 1931. And as you can see, if you come upon his headstone, it's nice to have his, short life story there. Okay, maybe I'll do another one. Louisa Troy was born in 1860 in Xenia. She was the daughter of a Civil War veteran. She began teaching in the Dayton school system in 1878 at schools on Ziegler Street and on 5th Street at Baxter. In 1887, Dayton schools were integrated, and Louise was the only African-American teacher who was retained. She provided early teacher training to young Black women in the early 1900s. And much of her teaching career was spent at Garfield School, where she taught until her retirement in 1920. Her pupils included Paul Lawrence Dunbar, James Parsons, and William O. Stokes. Her civic involvement included founding of the West Side Women's Christian Association, which later became the YWCA, the West Side YWCA. And in 1909, she bought the house at 5th and Horace Streets that was used for those West Side YWCA activities. She was also the co-founder and treasurer of the Dayton branch of the NAACP, and she died in March of 1941 and is located on the hillside just below the lookout at Woodland Cemetery. So I'll leave it there. We have 5 minutes left.
Any questions?
Any questions?
I don't have a question, but this has been fascinating. Yes.
Well, great, thank you, thank you.
When this weather breaks, I'm gonna take a long walk in Woodland and I'm gonna visit all these friends and I'm not letting Dr. Bass trip me.
Please, please.
So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank
And
you.
if anybody wants to stay afterwards and ask her a few questions and get to know.
But if you're looking for, Reverend Bass's, headstone, it's a slightly different color than some of the other ones. And it's more bronze, I think.
Yeah, it's a brownish brown.
Brown.
Look carefully, is that what you
So,
say?
yeah, but if you're in that general area, it stands out more than some of the other ones.
Except when it's covered with leaves in the fall, I'll just say that. But anyways, it was a good trip, that's for sure. And I feel that he was speaking to me and I heard him, listened, and I tell his story, so it's all very good. Well, thank you all so very much for coming out today. It was a great meeting with you.
And I just wanted to share, we do have a program coming up. Let's see, it's February 24th. And I don't know if this is the same person, but it's Frances McGee Cromartie. And she's gonna be she's a member of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And she's going to be talking about her revolutionary patron, Henry Dorton, who was one of about 9,000 African Americans who fought for the Patriots. So that's Tuesday night.
Thank you.
Right.
Fabulous.
I hope so.
I would have thought that maybe they were all.
It's just we
that's something I. No, they're all. They're all.